Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. So glad to be back in my favorite corner of our
Mm.
podcast ecosystem with our poet, Wendy Kieffer. Wendy, is good to see you. We took a couple weeks off, so we had a little bit more of a gap in this one, but how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It broke our stride. Like we were in a really good cadence of trying to do poetry really once a month, I think. And if you look at the overall landscape of the podcast, and it's been so good for just me personally, but I've heard from so many people that they love this little break, this little viewpoint where we pull over and get to enjoy poetry. And we're going to do it
Yeah.
today with a beautiful John Burnside poem
Yeah.
that you selected. But before we do that, I wanted to take a little bit longer of a pause right before we dive into the poem to do a little poetry 101. The dream, big dream, is for us to have this conservatory someday that's really serving the broader culture. And I say it all the time, expressing the life and beauty of the gospel, wondrously revealing Christianity, inviting people to know God personally, and doing it through art, through music, through literature, through content, immersive
Mm.
experiences. That's the day-to-day work of V3. And so we say that so many times, but people sometimes are like, well, what does that look like? And one of the things it looks like is staffing a poet
Mm.
and having you not just write poetry, which you did with Alchemy of Praise, a beautiful poetry publication. So creating an opportunity for you to be able to write and to keep writing.
Mm.
You've got a second book that we'll get to tease. This is
Yeah.
kind of the first tease of it, but a second book is in the works that's going to be coming out. And this one is a little bit different. I'll say more later on that. But a third aspect of having a poet on our staff is to be able to provide education
Mhm.
to these forms of art, whether it's visual art or music or poetry, to these ways of knowing
Yeah.
that we're not as familiar with in a Western context.
Mhm.
And they're important because there's ways of knowing that allow us to even know God
That's right.
and know Scripture and know what it is to be human.
Mhm.
And so recovering these things in our culture is deeply important to, again, knowing God personally, wondrously revealing Christianity. So I wanted to do some poetry 101 and just talk about the art form
Yeah.
itself. And from your experience, when do we first begin to be exposed to poetry in our culture, like American Western
Mhm.
modern culture? When you look back at the story, when is the first introduction that usually happens for people?
I would say nursery rhymes, children's books, anything rhyming, like a rhyming children's book. Um, I think even songs. I mean, their songs are poetry to music usually, or they could be. I don't want
Yeah.
to say should be, but so I think it starts early. I do think we've lost a little bit of the presence of poetry in our school system. It's declined and kind of in favor of STEM subjects, and so I think while there is some poetry sort of in the warp and woof of childhood, unless you're really conscious about making it a part of the curriculum, I think it can kind of maybe take a dip and then come back in high school when you're going into that ultra analyzing place that we've turned poetry into.
Mm.
And so then you're introduced to it in your literature classes in English, but it might feel a little bit more like a calculus problem because of the way we've sort of started to teach it in the last maybe 60 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great and helpful way of thinking about it. That it's present early on,
Yeah.
really for education, but also enjoyment, right?
Mm.
We're
Yeah.
singing to our kids, we're
Yeah.
rhyming with our kids, we're telling stories that have these elements
Mm-hmm.
in them poetically being told to our kids. And then somewhere it just kind of goes away in favor of other approaches to learning.
Yeah.
And then later we come back to it, but from an analytical side,
That's right.
not for the enjoyment necessarily of poetry, but maybe the appreciation of it and the analytical side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is maybe what leads to what we experience sometimes, where we'll do a poetry reading. You just hosted an event where your book, Alchemy of Praise, you were doing a public poetry
Right.
reading. And I wasn't able to be there, but I heard stories from families who were there with their kids, and the kids came alive.
Yeah.
And what was interesting to me is not just that the kids came alive, but their experience with their parents was
Mm,
really rich because now
yeah.
something beautiful was being experienced as good and
Mm,
then putting on the table these truths that would then travel home. And that's the power of it, right?
mm-hmm.
So I think recovering it is worth it and understanding that it's always been there in our
Right.
families. So those of us who say like, "Well, poetry's not for me," you've probably been saturated in poetry much longer than you've even been aware.
Mm,
And as you said, music. So we'll come back to that. But
right.
maybe could you give us, how would you describe like the difference between poetry and prose? I
Yeah.
think that's a great starting point. Like even those words might be unfamiliar with
Yeah.
people. And they go, I haven't
Right.
ever heard you use language like that. But what's the difference between when we say prose and
Mm.
poetry?
I mean, prose is a broad category. You can call essay writing prose. There's prose poetry, um, similar to the way we would speak, I suppose. But poetry sets itself apart in that it has rhythm, meter, repetition. It has a little more conscious engagement with your senses and what you're picking up
Mm,
for your senses. Poetry, I I mean, there's beautiful prose. When you read it, it impacts you in the same way that poetry does.
sure.
So I sometimes prose can get a bad rap, but
Great prose
there's
is
some
better than bad poetry,
yes,
right?
that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we do with the human language, it really is this musical?
Okay.
Does this have a rhythm and a cadence? Is this capturing something? Am I entering into it? I would say poetry is an immersive experience.
Mm,
That's what I love about it.
yes.
And I think that's what happened that night at the event is that not only did we read the poetry, not only did we unpack it a little and talk about it, but then the response from everyone there was to write their own poem and to make their own visual art. And I think there's something about that that immerses you into the poem. The more you read it, the more you might want to write it. The more you write it, the more you want to read it. And there's something about that exchange. Not everyone has to write poetry,
Sure.
but I was surprised that there was 100% involvement.
Yeah.
100% of the people there wrote a poem.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think with the right prompts and just with the right thing of like, it's not so distant and far and awkward. It's not like calculus. It's just, what do you see? What do you hear?
Yeah.
What do you smell? What do
Mm,
you sense?
mm,
What do you feel? And then being aware of those senses and they kind of come alive
mm.
and then being able to articulate that. And I think poetry, if it's done well, is really about the senses and the experience and trying to capture the human experience.
Yeah.
I think it was Billy Collins who said, history is a record of events.
Mm,
He said, poetry is a record of the human heart.
mm. Yeah. I love that. And the embodied nature of knowing, right? Like just
Right.
rational knowing, knowing of knowledge in a rational
Mhm.
way. Poetry invites you to know in an immersive way.
That's right.
And so I think just thank you for the attention, like to the musicality of it,
Yeah.
the rhythm of it, the particular attention to your senses,
Mhm.
the a little bit of mystery, a little bit of playfulness,
That's right.
right? Poetry offers us with words particular attention to those things,
Yeah.
right? The way it's constructed, the rhythm and meter of it,
Mhm.
the sensory experience, the
Mhm.
playfulness and
That's right.
the mystery and the twists and turns, the unexpected things
Yes.
that are there, particularly to allow you to experience something
That's
that the
right.
poet is imagining you experiencing,
Yes.
which is why reading it aloud is so important.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that you were really helpful early on when we were having some live discussions about poetry is you were saying it's important to read it,
Mhm.
that it's an art form that's meant to be read aloud.
Yeah.
Why is that important in the experience of poetry? And I'm kind of inviting Wendy to share this because I'm hoping that you might get a little bit more, we all might get a little more
Mhm.
enjoyment out of poetry because I'll do this at home where I'll try to read a poem and it feels like there's a lot of distance
Mm.
between the page and my
Mhm.
senses. And I wonder if reading aloud might help close that gap. So why do
Right.
you think reading it's so important aloud?
Again, I think it has to do a lot with the musicality of language. And so It helps it to breathe. It helps the pauses. It helps you to slow down when you read poetry, because you can read silently much faster than you can out loud. So you automatically have to slow down. I think that it lives now in your body, not just in your mind. So you're hearing yourself. It's resonating through you. You're taking the time to be a little more conscious of your breath, where the line breaks are, where you might be breathing. And then you kind of embody it.
Yes.
And so the thing about poetry, I mean, Shakespeare said this, where it's like a little habitation.
Mm-hmm.
You're building a little building out of words.
Yes.
A place for that experience of what it means to be human, to live. And then you're putting words to it. And so, have you ever had the experience where someone will say, "Thank you for putting words to the thing I was feeling." And somehow the words, I think that must happen to you quite a bit. Somehow putting words to the thing that you're feeling alleviates it, makes you feel less alone, makes you understand your own heart much clearer, and somehow has a resonance to it. And so you build this little habitation out of words, and then you can enter into it and come back to it. When it comes in either through memory, like classical education, a lot of the curriculum is about memorizing poems, putting them in. But whether it comes into your heart or you keep revisiting it, now that little habitation is living inside of you. And so I think it's very embodied. It's not cerebral only. And I think that's the power of it if we allow it to be that. And, it's a recovery for sure. There's a resistance, I think. Like poetry is a revolution.
Yeah, and I think to us, like in V3, Saint Irenaeus saying the glory of God is man fully alive, and the human being fully alive, charged with grandeur, all these things that you hear us talking about. This is why I'm so passionate about it, because everybody who's listening to this podcast, we were not meant to be mechanized doers of mechanical things simply for the sake of doing them. Like the glory of God is humankind fully alive and charged and playful, musical, surprising, mysterious. And too much of our modern moment has said, oh yeah, some people are like that. Eccentric people in little beatnik cafes in San Francisco, they're like that. And I say to everybody who would say that, that's not true, actually. Like we're all made in the image of God, who has this part of how he's made us to be, to reflect a part of who he is that is beautiful. It is beautiful, objectively beautiful. And we bear some of that. And I think that's, again, what leads Lewis to say, you've never met a mere mortal. There isn't a widget producing mechanized person that's dehumanized version. No, every human being is charged with that beauty of God. But we don't talk like it.
No. And
we don't write like it.
We don't. And I think even as believers, I think we have that moment where we need to recognize 1/3 of the Bible is poetry. And I think that's even like a modest estimate. It just really depends on the translation. But I think, when you ask yourself, well, why? I've oftentimes thought of, from Psalms, he will hide you in the shadow of his wings. Why does he say it like this? Or even, he will lead you beside still waters. He could say, I will protect you. Just the facts, ma'am. He could say, I will calm you. Why does he say, I will lead you beside still waters? What does that do when you hear it? What does it communicate beyond just, I will protect you, I will make you calm? You experience it, don't you? Yeah.
Well, and this is that wondrously revealing Christianity so that I could know God personally. He didn't write us like the little laminated thing that we pull out of the seat at the airplane that's like, get out this way, get out that way, stay safe this way. His desire is that we would know him. And if I'm going to write you a letter, 1/3 of the letter that I wrote you so that you might know me is written in poetry. Because I want you to know that part of me, a way of knowing that doesn't just know I'm going to lead you by still waters, but knows that I love you so much that I'm going to speak to you like that. I'm going to sing to you like that. That is, we want you to know God personally. And 1/3 of what he communicated explicitly to us about himself is communicated in this poetic art form so that we might know him in that way.
It's
So
so good. And enjoy him.
Yes. Yeah.
And enjoy his heart.
Yeah.
And think of his heart and connect with his heart. And how can our hearts connect with his heart if our hearts are a little closed, guarded, a little shut down, a little half alive? It's harder. But that's a gorgeous image you're trying to communicate it to me in Psalms. And my response is a gorgeous response. Yeah. And then it goes back and forth. Yeah. And your prayers become little poems.
Yeah, I love that. And it warms your affection, right?
Yes.
We say God should be the highest affection of the human heart.
Right.
Right. Well, what warms the affection?
That's right.
If we talk to each other in just mechanical ways, that doesn't warm us in the same way.
That's right.
That this way of communicating does.
And he's the judge, he's the king, but he's the father, he's the husband, he's the friend. There's all these layers to it.
Yes.
So we do have the law,
sure,
and we need that. But this other element is obviously a little atrophied, I think. Yeah. So fun to...
I hope that's helpful. Thank you. I think that's, again, like our big dream of being able to have a full-time poet and to put back in culture these essential things that were a part of our social fabric and our how we created an imaginary of what is real and what does it mean to be human. The artists were helping us to have language for that, helping us to have knowing of that. So thank you. That's just a glimpse into the power of having a poet alongside to help us. So, and I hope it helps us enjoy this. So I want to ask you to talk about John Burnside, introduce the poet and the poem that you've chosen, and then you can kind of take us into it.
Great. This is John Burnside. He's a Scottish poet. He actually passed away last year. So it felt good to center on one of his poems. It always feels like a tribute to someone who had such a broad contribution in his lifetime. So Scottish poet. I really enjoyed getting to know him in a deeper way. He has a really subtle but lyrical style. Writes in mainly prose poetry, but very thoughtful, very Scottish. Now that I've been reading poets enough, I'm like, this is very Scottish. There's a little touch of the supernatural and a little mystery. He won a lot of awards. I think he had like 9 collections of poetry and a couple of novels. But he's known for being a deep ecologist. Oh. Which I didn't even know what that was. But apparently it is basically having the belief that all created things, all natural things in the environment have a intrinsic value that is separate from human use, so that they should have a basic moral and legal right. That they're not just utilitarian to be used by humans and that's all their value is. I was like, woof, okay. Yeah. That's a whole like subplot. You see it in his poetry where he has, you'll read a poem about him watching goldfish being handed out at a carnival for your little prize. You hit the balls, you get a goldfish. He's like, what? Yeah. So he has that, we've talked about that before, just some of the things that we've become a little accustomed to in the modern world that he's kind of challenging through some of his poems. This one's called The Good Neighbor, and he has the collection that this came from is also called The Good Neighbor. And we can just get right into it. One thing I love about this poem in particular is the setting is this very liminal moment. And that means it's between. It takes place in the small hours of the morning. And I love the liminal. Poets tend to love those spaces, that little slice of moment after something, but before something else. It's a transitional moment, and there's power in it, and there's beauty, and there's transformation in that liminal space. So it takes place in that moment. So
before you dive into it, again, that just happened live, so I want to call it out. Part of the value, hopefully, that comes from these conversations is you've introduced John Burnside. Yeah. Thank you. And who do we trust to point us in the direction of something good or true or beautiful? So we hope this can be a place where you go, you know what? Let me chase that down and order a collection. The second thing, that idea of liminal space, You might have heard that term before and not known what it is. So thank you for saying it and then defining it.
Yeah.
It's so good and helpful. So
Yeah. And then
thank
you
you.
might notice it more,
Yeah.
just those transitional moments that you'll be more aware of. I'm fascinated with liminal time and liminal space as well.
Yeah.
So it's good. I'm going to read it and then we can kind of dive into it.
Love it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Kieffer, and I am honored and overjoyed to share with you my debut poetry collection, Alchemy of Praise. I chose the word alchemy for the title because it represents transformation, and especially the kind that is magnificent or mysterious and even inexplicable. Also, alchemy represents the kind of change that is possible through poetry, taking beauty from ashes and the way it lives inside of us, transforming the way we see or perceive our world. And you'll find in this collection a variety of themes, poems on wonder and stillness, poems that exalt God and lift our eyes up, and also poems that explore the interior spaces of the soul. All of these I offer to you with love and deep gratitude. You can find your copy on Amazon. And here's to allowing poetry to do as Jana Joya said, to awaken, amplify, and refine our sense of being alive. Thanks again. The Good Neighbor. Somewhere along this street, unknown to me, behind a maze of apple trees and stars, he rises in the small hours, finds a book, and settles at a window or a desk to see the morning in, alone for once, unnamed, unburdened, happy in himself. I don't know who he is. I've never met him, walking to the fish house or the bank, and yet I think of him on nights like these, waking alone in my own house, my other neighbors quiet in their beds, like drowsing flies. He watches what I watch, tastes what I taste. On winter nights, the snow. In summer, sky. He listens for the bird lines in the clouds, and like that ghost companion in the old explorer's tales, that phantom in the sleet, fifth in a party of four, he's not quite there, but not quite inexistent nonetheless. And when he lays his book down, checks the hour, and fills a kettle, something hooded stops. As cell by cell, a heartbeat at a time, my one good neighbor sets himself aside and alters into someone I have known, a passing stranger on the road to grief, husband and father, rich man, poor man, thief.
It's I love the story in that way as you're describing like particular types of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a type that you're able to enter into a world, into
Yes,
a story and follow along.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all imagined. So we just scratched the surface on what poetry is, but here's a poet using his imagination to make connection, to recognize his own individualism, but also his own oneness, to make a subtle claim about maybe suburban life. To all of that is happening in his imagination.
Mhm.
And so I think we've done that before. We had a Billy Collins poem where he was like talking about the chairs that no one sits in. Imagine what would happen if someone sat down in the chair.
Mhm.
And so this imagination that's activating is really touching on so many truths.
Yeah.
And so he says, somewhere along this street, unknown to me, behind a maze of apple trees and stars, I'm imagining he rises in the small hours,
Hmm.
finds a book, and settles at a window or a desk to see the morning in, alone for once, unnamed, unburdened, happy in himself. Before the words, before the labels, before wherever he's going to go before he connects to the society we have made and the culture at large and the collective destiny.
Mm.
He has this moment of individuation, this moment where he is rising and finding a book.
Mhm.
I love that because even though he's alone, he's really not. I mean,
Mhm.
books are bloodless friends, you know.
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
still, you're still receiving. They say reading is receiving,
Yeah.
and speaking and writing is like reading is breathing in, speaking and writing is breathing out.
Mm.
And he's receiving in this small moment. He's at a window, so he's thoughtful. He's looking.
Mm.
And I love this about how he's alone, and the fact that he's unnamed means that he's also unburdened.
Mhm.
Because once you have a name, you have a burden.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mm.
think anyone who has an Instagram account with lots of
Yeah.
followers would probably agree. It's something that becomes, you know, a little bit of a
Mm.
taskmaster. And, you know, that idea that I'm unnamed, I'm unburdened, I'm happy, he's happy in himself. So I love this. I don't know who he is. I've never met him.
Mm.
And that line is very resonant because even though he's talking about this imagined neighbor, you also imagine he could be talking about that inner self that I haven't connected with in a while. I don't know who he is. I've never met
Mm.
who I
Mm.
am inside. I've never met myself. There is this blurry line.
Yeah.
Walking to the fish house or the bank. Fish house where you consume, the bank where you money. You know, he's not walking to the pier to go fishing or to have some experience. He's going to consume and going at this person. I'm not going to meet him at the consuming place or the money place.
Mhm.
I'm meeting him here in the wee hours.
Mhm.
And yet I think of him on nights like these, waking alone in my own house, my other neighbors, quiet in their beds, like drowsing flies. And here we have this moment of we have the contrast between sleeping and awake.
Mhm.
So they're drowsing flies. Drowsing flies are flies that thrive in stagnant water,
Mm.
like your toilet and your
Mhm. Mhm.
pipelines. There's a stagnation
Mm.
there. You're sleeping and quiet in your bed. There's a little touch of that suburban domestication of stagnation
Mm.
and being awake, your senses alive and awake,
Mm.
and being like a drowsy, sleeping, maybe automated,
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
automated type
Mhm.
of human.
Mm.
And so then he's saying he watches what I watch, tastes what I taste. I think you've often mentioned that C.S. Lewis
Mm.
quote, you know, you've met a friend when you
Yes.
say, you
Oh, you
too?
too.
Yeah. So he has this moment of connection where the other is erased and it becomes one. And I love that he says, tastes what I taste, because yes, watches what I watch. That's important.
Mhm.
But this is very intimate.
Mhm.
He tastes what I taste.
Mhm.
It's very internal. It's very intimate. On winter nights, the snow in summer sky. He listens. So all the senses of this person are watching,
Mhm.
listening, tasting. He listens for the bird lines in the clouds. And like that ghost companion in the old explorer's tales, that phantom in the sleet, fifth in a party of four, he's not quite there,
Mm.
but not quite inexistent nonetheless.
Mm.
Oh,
It's
so
so good.
good.
Yeah, the
It's
fifth in a party of four is
it's
just
so
like
good. And I was like, what does he mean explorer's tales? And I looked at it, and Shackleton,
mm.
you know, the
Yes.
Antarctic
Mhm.
explorer, and his companions saw another companion that guided them
Mm.
along the journey.
Mm.
Lindbergh, crossing the Atlantic, had a phantom co-pilot with him that he talked to the whole time.
Mm.
There was even a story about one of the men escaping from the Twin Towers from the 88th floor. He said he saw someone leading him down the entire way.
Mm.
So this is very common in a high intensity situation. Of course, you think of the furnace with
Sure. Yeah, there's
we see
another
another.
one in the fire. Yeah.
Yes. But I love that because it's very mysterious and ephemeral and supernatural, even,
Mm.
you know, that idea that somehow he's in my
Mm.
imagination too. And that's real, but not real,
Mhm.
but I'm projecting. And so he's blurring the lines between self and other, between real and imaginary. He's doing this great fuzzy blur that actually ends up putting me in the position. I feel like the one he's imagining.
Mhm.
And then I suddenly turn and I feel like him.
Mhm. Mm.
So that beautiful way that he just blurs the lines is gorgeous and is very effective about this poem. And he says, and when he lays down his book, so that's over, that receiving, that quiet receiving from a bloodless friend. He lays down his book, he checks the hour. Now we're back in time. It fills a kettle. It's time to get going. Something hooded stops. Hooded. What a cool word. It's mysterious, it's private, it's covered, it's almost brooding, hatching. Something hooded stops.
So good.
As cell by cell, heartbeat at a time, my one good neighbor sets himself aside. And I circled the word one because I think you do feel a little lonely being one that's very sensitive and observant and takes the time to check in with the inner world. And I thought I want him to have more than one. You know, he sets himself aside. I think we've all felt that too, where you might lose a little bit of that connection to that self, that unnamed, unburdened, happy in himself person, because now you have all these labels, and those come again in the final portion of the poem, and alters into someone I have known, a passing stranger on the road to grief, husband and father, rich man, poor man, thief. And that mystery, that enchantment, that contentment that he derived from solitude has come to an end almost. And everyone has maybe put on a little bit more of a outward expression. We kind of can reduce one another to a certain, there's husband, father, and we lose that person that's sort of deeper than all of those things. And I think as a mom of 4, and you're operating in all these different spaces, I do think you do have to take time to remember who you are.
I love that you started with that liminal space and saying something's taking place here in a different space and time in this transitionary moment. I got my book, and it's in this particular hour.
Yep.
And I think all of us have experienced that, where then we kind of snap out of it,
right?
And we're back into that non-liminal space. We're re-entered back into this other form of time.
Right.
But something happened there that was really important. And I think that's what I want to know, why you chose this poem, but you sent it my way. What resonated with me is, wow, what a gift to, in that blurring of the lines way, bring us into that moment and allow us to experience that moment with him, and to know something happened in that space. And probably we've experienced that, where there's something really important to pay attention to that happened in that space. Like if you went up in your nook this morning and for a second, unburdened, unnamed, entered into this other space, and you were reading, you were praying, you were thinking, something else emerges. Something those are important to pay attention to and to not ignore. So.
That's right. And I think you said the Pope was warning against the interiority of man, having that interior time. If we extend out, we're extending out to our various zones locally, we're extending out even to know about world news, we're extending out through social media, we're extending out quite a bit. This becomes an even more important moment in the day, crucial even to the health and well-being and just the fully alive, man fully alive. This becomes a crucial moment. To have that solitary moment, but then to realize you're not really alone. There's a lot in here about individualism versus otherness versus community versus there's a lot in here that's exploring what that means. Yeah.
And I think that I'm curious for you as a mom, because you have a very busy life, a very full life. Where do you find, do you try to be particular and fight for those times, or do you seize them when they're there for you? Do you find them surprisingly?
It's interesting because I think there are big moments of that where you go and you reconnect with the deeper parts of yourself that are unconnected and unburdened and unnamed. like the pilgrimage I went
Mhm.
on, that was a good 10 days away from my normal responsibilities to kind of get in touch with that person again. But I would say that I go for walks, I go for prayer walks constantly, and I have quiet time in the morning and even at night.
Mm.
I don't usually go to sleep without having that moment with God, and even if it's short,
Mm.
just to recalibrate, just to check in, another liminal space,
Yeah.
right? A moment before. But I think once
Mm.
you start doing this, once you start having the time alone, the solitude and that quiet that can, because it's so noisy now, the digital noise, it's very, very
Mm.
loud. And to take a quiet moment
Mm.
where you don't touch your phone first thing in the morning.
Mhm.
You don't. It's a lot of color, a lot of sound, and
Mm.
a lot of light, and a lot of, it's external.
Mm.
And you take the moment to just be more internal.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
then you start to crave it.
Mm.
You start to it's almost like, well, of course I didn't go a week without eating, right? You start to feel like uh, it's a part of your existence is to have some
Mm.
solitary time.
Mm. Yeah.
And then you crave it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, wait a minute, it's so rare.
Yeah.
So it becomes more valuable when you're a busy parent.
Mhm.
It becomes so valuable. You become more conscious of how am I going to use it?
Yeah.
I don't need to do some big thing, but I know what I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to reach for something digital. I'm not going to fill it with a bunch of sound.
Yeah. I think I love that you chose this and it resonated right away. I think for a lot of the
Yeah.
reasons that it jumped off the page for you. I think knowing that interiority of our lives is so um, urgently in need of
Yeah.
irrigation and nourishment. The first thing that I'm excited to just say thank you for bringing this poem up is let's pay attention that that's a part of us that matters. Like God made, we always say vision up, vision in, vision out, that there's an interiority. There's a
Yes.
reality of who we are made to be that needs time and
Mm-hmm.
attention. It needs nourishment. It's like a part of a house that you haven't been in and you just are like, I don't know, I don't never go in that room. And you open it up and it's cold and there's a staleness to the air and like, man, I have not inhabited this
Mm.
room and it's a part of my home and
Mm.
it's just separate, other, absent. And I think that this is a great invitation to say like that's a part of us that is made to be inhabited and to be nourished. So
Mm.
first I just put it matters, like pay attention, let this
Yeah.
be an invitation to pay attention. And the second thing was like find it. And we want to be your
Yeah.
biggest advocates in this. Like this is us in our morning show, like cheering us all on to say, be generously not just okay with, but be generously excited
Yeah.
to say, I'm going to go sneak up and have that and enter into that liminal space. And maybe it's you go for a walk.
Mm.
Maybe it's you do it on a run. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's that you can only find it in a commute, but you don't put Spotify on. You shut this podcast off and say, I'm going to enter into that other space. And so find it and then enjoy it.
Yeah.
And don't be bashful that that was really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And we have to remember that Jesus went off and prayed alone. He went
Mm.
off and got some solitary time. I mean, we're going to be looking at everything he does, right? It's in there for a reason. It's recorded for a reason. It's important. It's powerful
Yeah.
and it's precious and it's fleeting. And
Yeah.
you have to sort of take it back and say it's important. I'm going to remember who I am outside of father,
Mm.
employee, churchgoer. You have to remember who you are
Mm.
without the cultural context for a moment. Have a moment,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, so good
Yeah.
to start with unnamed, unburdened, and then
Oof.
return back to titles and labels
That's right.
and how he just stops.
Yeah.
So I love
But
it. Would you?
even when he says a passing stranger on the road to grief, I mean, he just names it right there.
Yeah.
It's all a matter of time for you, for you, for you. We're all going to have hurt and wounds. And then eventually it's our time to go. That right there is even a more of a sensitivity to the state of each human around you that I think is cultivated from this imagination and time alone and thinking about the other and taking the time to just unpack that.
Yeah.
And now he's got a little bit, even with the labels up, he's like, you're still on the road to grief.
Yeah. There you go.
I still see you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What a beautiful poem. And I love, again, some of these that are blurrier lines. When you're not, when poetry's not the world you live in, they can be tough to get your mind around in this short time, too, especially because you're not holding it in your hand.
Right.
But what a beautiful invitation to say, that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to have something that's a little more blurry on the lines.
Hmm.
And what I would say is don't force yourself to try to be certain of every single thing. Just allow the poem to do what it's inviting, to invite you on the journey that it's already going on,
That's great.
and you'll find something. So maybe
That's
take
great.
us on that to take us out.
Okay. The Good Neighbor by John Burnside. Somewhere along the street, unknown to me, behind a maze of apple trees and stars, he rises in the small hours, finds a book, and settles at a window or a desk to see the morning in, alone for once, unnamed, unburdened, happy in himself. I don't know who he is. I've never met him walking to the fish house or the bank, and yet I think of him on nights like these, waking alone in my own house, my other neighbors quiet in their beds like drowsing flies. He watches what I watch, tastes what I taste, on winter nights the snow, in summer sky. He listens for the bird lines in the clouds, and like that ghost companion in the old explorer's tales, that phantom in the sleet, fifth in a party of four, he's not quite there, but not quite inexistent nonetheless. And when he lays his book down, checks the hour and fills a kettle, something hooded stops. As cell by cell, a heartbeat at a time, my one good neighbor sets himself aside and alters into someone I have known, a passing stranger on the road to grief, husband and father, rich man, poor man, thief